Hello, everybody. Hello. So, we are going to get started. Hello, and welcome to the last installment this year for the More Than Words, where every 3 months, we've had two local authors and had a local bookshop owner or representative coming and talking about the book clubs and various topics that people have written about. And so today we have Shelby Sycke, and we have Marian Massie, and Tom Stewart from Old Sport Gallery should be here at some point. So anyway, my name is Lynn Drinkwater, and for those of you that I'm just seeing for the first time, this is the Moore County Senior Enrichment Center, and I sure hope that you receive, or when you go down the lobby, grab a newsletter and a calendar, and you'll see other events and things that are coming up in the near future. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Shelby. Do you want to hold the mic, or do you want to have it here?
Put it in there.
All right, you just have to speak
I'm not that
close
talented.
to it.
I can do that. I think so. We'll see. Let me know if I'm doing it right. Okay, let's see. I can't see you over there. What's back here? I always bring music. All right. Welcome. Glad to see you. I know you guys have your time is valuable, so I will promise you that I will be short. Okay. Okay. As the young lady just said, my name's Shelby, and I write books. And if you're here because you want to improve your spiritual growth, or you're trying to get a better understanding of the meaning of life, I can't help you. Because I write books that are humorous historical fiction, and they're based on baby boomers. Are any of you guys baby boomers? Anyway, raise your hand. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I was born in 1955, which was right dead center in the middle of the baby boom generation. So anybody around that age? I think at least one back here might have been born. Same over here. What year were you born? Come on. 50. Oh, 50. Okay, mere child. Are you sure she's allowed to be in the senior center? All right. Anyway, you've got to admit one thing. Baby boomers were a unique generation, or are a unique generation. Absolutely. And, you can spot them. You know when you're around them. And, of course, you've probably been badgered by the younger generation. If you heard the term, okay, boomer, where they're like, those baby boomers trying to give advice again. Well, that's not what I'm doing here. I am a boomer. I love the generation, and I like to write about it. And, you can always spot a boomer. I'm going to give you a test here. You ready? Here's how you can spot a boomer in a dark room. You just say, a horse is a horse. Right. The famous Mr. Ed. Or something a little bit more direct, like, I know it's only rock and roll, but I like it. All right. All right. But we boomers do have some practical knowledge. I was sharing some with this young lady earlier. We know how to actually dial a telephone. We still say go dial a number, but we didn't even have to dial it. Or roll up a car window. These concepts escape the current generation, absolutely. But we're unique as a generation because we were big. That's why it was called the boom. And we lived through some amazing times with some shared experiences, from way back to Sputnik in the 50s, JFK, Vietnam, the whole year of 1968, Watergate. But there was some good stuff, too. I remember the good stuff like the Mickey Mouse Club, MICKE, American Bandstand, and, of course, the underlying current that fueled us all was rock and roll music, and we all sort of loved that. So what's that got to do with my books? My stories are told from the perspective of a baby boomer and about that generation, and I write about that time, so it's historical fiction. I didn't start with fiction, but it's historical fiction about that time. Back when, I grew up in a small town about the same size as Pinehurst, a little further north up in Maryland, up in the mountains of Maryland. But, it was back in the days when oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know we were live streaming. Okay, so this is being picked up by MSNBC or? Oh, okay, all right. Sorry, folks. Bottom line is our generation was focused on some important things like school rivalries, high school football games, fast cars, double dating, and maybe a little underage drinking. I bet. Yeah, that's what teenagers had on their mind back then, and that's the fun I try to bring to my stories. But we were unique in time. Don't know what will happen again, but there'll be other good generations. But my books try to capture that spirit, and they're based on my experiences and historical stuff that was going on at the time. So I kind of like to think of them as a mixture of American Graffiti and Murder, She Wrote for the mysteries, But some people have asked me, why do you write about something that's 50 years old? And I look at them and I say, people are always writing about stuff that's 50 years old. When we were kids, we watched movies like, what was it, The Music Man. It was about Henry Hill trying to get money from folks back 50 years before that time. Or Pollyanna, precocious little girl trying to sneak out of her house, as I remember, her grandmother's house or something like that. It was a lot of fun. And so I could figure I could write about stuff too. But more importantly, I've always been told that you should write about stuff you know. Don't try to write about stuff you don't know. So I know how I was back then. I have lots of stories. I love to tell humorous stories. I've told that I tell fun stories and people enjoy it. So I tried to capture that in my books. And that's sort of why I write. But my desire to write was frustrating for a long time. I wanted to write, but I didn't know how to do it. And I was always worried that I wouldn't have the time to do it or I wouldn't have the competency. And then I retired. And guess what? I had a lot of time. I still didn't have the competency, but I was like, what the hell? Why wait for that? So I just opened up Microsoft Word on my computer and started typing. And 6 months later, I had 100,000 words. And I went, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And so I spent the next year working with professionals and amateurs and publishers and trying to boil that down into a book. And that turned into my first book, which is called Slow Children Playing on the Way to Band Camp. And that's what started my road sign series of books. Now, why is a road sign and slow children playing a focus of my first book? Because a couple guys and I decided one night we were going to go get ourselves a road sign. Unfortunately, we ended up in the police department waiting for our dads to bail us out. You may ask, why do I have the sign? This is the sign. Yeah. You'll have to read. You'll have to read the book to find out about that. Yeah, but it was fun, and I've tried to focus on the things. The other aspect of my title is it's on the way to band camp. Well, I'm a band geek. I grew up in a musical family, and my dad was the director of the music department at my high school, so I had no choice. But it was a lot of fun, and I think I captured in this book all the sort of the wild things and the mystery. There is a mystery about that buried in this first book, and the mystery is, how did I survive all that? I look back, I didn't tell my kids about any of these stories until long after they were out of the house. But I look back and I really wonder how I survived some of that stuff, because we just had a lot of fun and did pretty much whatever we wanted to do. Well, I got some great feedback on that book, which I encourage you to go on Amazon.com. I'll give you a QR code that you can check on it later. But go on Amazon.com and read the reviews. You can actually read parts of the book so you can get a flavor for it yourself and make up your mind. Well, I said I'd try to write another book, but I was smart enough to know that I couldn't take my life and just continue to spin it forward because there just wasn't enough there to make a second book. So I said, okay, I'll write historical fiction, humorous historical fiction. In other words, I'll make stuff up. But I wanted to keep writing about stuff I knew, so I kept most of the characters, I kept the locations, and I threw in a lot of history from that area, and also threw in a murder mystery and some other magic stuff. So to keep my book unique, every book that I've written has those three elements: mystery, history, and magic. In my second book, Slippery When Wet, as you can see from the book picture there, I think, slightly modified. That's an arm sticking out of the car with a beer can in it. In Slippery When Wet, the mystery is who blew up the town's World War II hero in his own tank. And the history is the church I went to, my hometown, was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And there was people trying to escape to freedom using the same facilities I did as a kid only 100 years earlier. So I roll that into it. And the magic is somebody, not me, gets dosed with a bit of hallucinogenic drugs. And that part of the story spins off and ends up helping solve the mystery. In the third book, another sign, you might have seen it, One Way. No, it's not a religious story. But One Way, a murder mystery. The mystery is, why did the rocket scientist kill himself with his own rocket? The history is, there really was a rocket manufacturing company in my hometown, or a facility in my hometown, and there was a terrible accident there in my childhood, and there was a big mystery about what went on there at that time. And the magic in that one is Trixie, the tarot card reader, and she provides a lot of insight, shall we say, from the world beyond. And so fun characters always make a book better, I think. Not just history, it's people and a lot of humor. Finally, my most recent book, Crossroad, and that's two words, crossroad, not plural, because that's what that sign's called. It's a crossroad sign. They put it up at a crossroads. That's one word, plural. Why, I don't know these things, but English is odd. Anyway, in that one, in Crossroads, the mystery is there's a serial killer on the loose. And this one has some real neat stuff because it's a wild, true story. A B-52 bomber in January 1964 crashed 30 miles from my home. And on board were 2 thermonuclear weapons. Luckily, they didn't detonate, or I wouldn't be here. And the world would be a very different place, not because I'm not here, but because 2 thermonuclear weapons took out a large chunk of West Virginia. Well, I guess they wouldn't miss West Virginia, but Maryland and Pennsylvania. And so luckily that didn't happen. And the magic in this book is that there's a second-rate magician who's down on his luck, but gets entwined in the mystery and helps solve it. So that's the book I just finished this year and got published earlier there in March, I think is when I published it. So my characters in all my books are friends, family, fictional people, as I told you about, amalgam of fiction and real guys, because I have some friends that I love to include in the book, but they don't want their name in there. So that's fun. But they all interweave and have a good time. So I'm going to finish up here real quick about me. I'm 69 years old, as you might have done the math from being born in 1955. I retired about 12 years ago after spending 30 years in the Air Force. And now I write these silly books. I'm in a community band here, the Moore County Community Band, which I love. I've been playing an instrument ever since 1962. And I've married and got 4 children and 5 grandchildren, and I couldn't be happier. And I thought I'd And, oh, my good friends. Oh, absolutely. I have some great friends here. Let me tell you, that's one nice thing about living down here in this area is it's easy to make friends, and they're good friends. So I appreciate them, especially Marian. Okay. Well, let me spend the last few minutes just reading to you a paragraph from my most recent book. And I've talked about all the funny parts, so I'm not going to read you the funny part. This is a serious part. It's chapter 1, just a paragraph entitled Buzz 14. And Buzz 14 was the call sign of that B-52. Townley returned singing along as the plane rattled more harshly than ever before. The rattling turned into a deep rumble, and the sound of metal straining joined in. The two flyers looked at each other. They were clearly experiencing something new. Then the entire 500,000-pound jet slammed to the right, jumping at least 50 feet as if a child's toy discarded an angler. Townley bounced off the bulkhead as an earthquake-like noise roared from behind him. Something big gave way with a loud snap, followed by the sound of metal tearing. Mayday, mayday, this is Buzz 14. All aft hydraulic systems out, unable to control pitch and yaw. Mayday, mayday, the pilot shouted over the radio. This is air traffic control at Cleveland. We did not copy that. Please repeat. The B-52 pitched nose down and began to roll. Townley fell on the ceiling as the plane inverted. Bail out, bail out, bail out, screamed the pilot through the intercom. So it starts with a bang. Okay. I talked a lot about baby boomers, so I'm going to end with a trivia question to all you smart baby boomers out there. All right? And I talked a lot about rock and roll, so this is a rock and roll question. Oh, by the way, if you answer this question right, I'll give you a free book. How's that? After the Beatles broke up in 1970, by the way, raise your hand if you know the question's answer. After the Beatles broke up in 1970, which of the Fab Four was the first to have a #1 hit in the United States? Come on, it's 1 out of 4. I'm sorry. Wrong. Correct. It was, do you remember what the song was? My Sweet Lord. That's right. All righty. Here you go. You get my skinny book. Okay. I'm done. I'll turn it over to Marian because now it's time for something completely different. Thank you.
Well, I think Shelby did a great job. Give him another hand. I mean, really, Shelby, you did a great job. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Marian Massie. I've written this book. It's the third book that I've written, most recent. We actually came out about the same month. Miracles, Karma, Reincarnation, a handbook to purposeful living. And to give you a little background about me, I've been a hypnotherapist and success coach for about 30 years. I help individuals. I used to live in Atlanta and I still practice here. I help them in business and personal development. And they'll come to me with different problems and I help them change core belief systems subconsciously and give them tools to live. So what does that have to do with my book? Pretty much everything. Anyway, I'm going to give you a story of why I started writing. Unlike Shelby, who wanted to write and have time to write, I have never wanted to write. I can't spell. And I mean, I'm really bad at spelling. And it just never even occurred to me. So what has been a part of my life is always connecting with spirit. I was raised up north, and I was the youngest of 8, but it was like I was the oldest because most of my brothers and sisters were out of the nest by that time. My mom was really sick, and I took over the house when I was about 10. And I had a lot of responsibility. And back in the day, as Shelby would say, in boomer time, you didn't have therapy, you didn't have people talking to you, and I was pretty much alone and having a lot of responsibility. And I was always a seeker, always going within. I was in elementary school with thinking about what is life all about. What kid does that? But that helped me throughout so much. And there was a great story in my book, which is true, of how spirit talks to you. And sometimes it's very direct and literal. Sometimes it's through nudges. Sometimes it's through, like miracles. And this was a miracle that happened to me. I was a very responsible little kid. I still am. Not a little kid, but responsible. And I'm doing my homework, and I think I must have been about 12 years old. So my brother had been back from the service. Now, that service people are shown how to discharge their weapon and clean their weapon, correct? You wouldn't think that he would be pointing it inside the house. So his room was over here. There was a hallway, and then my room. And I'm sitting there doing my homework. I didn't know he was even in his room. And he had a handgun. He was cleaning the handgun. I heard this voice as loud as you are hearing this. Get up and go on the bed. And I got up and go on the bed, and all of a sudden his gun went off. And if I would have been sitting there, it would have gone through my temple. As it was, I felt it go through my hair. I never told anybody that story until I wrote my first book. But that solidified for me that I wasn't alone, that this is a spiritual journey, and I have help. So, and my brother at that time, as they say in the South, bless your heart, all of a sudden it dawned on him, she might be in that room. And he called out my name, and, I was okay. But anyway, that is my journey. And then I ended up going out on my own at 15 for a lot of different reasons, really for my own well-being, because I was going downhill because of all the problems in our house. And so, again, spirit was always there for me. I kept looking for how to really survive and now thrive. Most people have a lot more help. And so they're not aware a lot of times of the spiritual journey that we have. And I'm not talking about religion. Any path is correct for you. What I'm saying is just get plugged into that. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And that's the whole premise of my book. So back to how I started writing it. So I've always lived this way. And I'm not perfect by any means, but I've always lived this way. And then one time I had a dream, and I do believe that spirit talks to us through dreams. And I talk about that in my book and how to discern what the dreams are meaning. I had a dream. It was a very profound dream that, it's pretty funny when I think about it, that I heard, you are going to write several books to help people. I'm what? I can't spell. I said that in the dream. And it was just like, no, you're going to do it. I was like, oh, really? I don't want to. Anyway, at that time, back in the day, I had a computer, and I just started to put my journals and my dreams into the computer. And it was just like this voice throughout that time was telling me what to write. And that's how my first book came. And the first book is You Are Soul. And it was like, whoa. And just like with Shelby, I had to have a lot of people to, help. It's a big journey to write a book, to have it done well, and especially when somebody can't spell. So I found a fabulous editor, and she helped me with all 3 books. And it's been a journey. So what you learn from this book, I found that from my clients, that there was no one book I could give them to help them in their whole life. Because my purpose is to help individuals, more than get rid of problems, is to live consciously. And the more consciously you live or connected to spirit, the happier you become. Because after this, you as souls still exist. And so what do you do in this present moment makes a difference in your thoughts, in your emotions, in every action. And most of us are not given a game plan. So I try my best to help you have some kind of game plan. So this is a condensed kind of game plan book, purposeful living, conscious living. So I go through and explain what spirit is, not trying to say you have to be of any religion. And then what are miracles? We've all experienced them, but we don't acknowledge them, or we're not as conscious of them. Because I've had little miracles, like one of those little miracles like, wow, you're thinking of somebody and then boom, they call you. You know, that's a connection. That's a little tiny miracle. So also I go step by step in this book about how our thoughts are energy and how to change unconscious thoughts. I give you processes that are easy to recognize what are negative thoughts, because you don't want to keep making those thoughts. Most of us, we don't realize that we've been programmed from the time we've been born to believe a certain way. And I believe in freedom. Freedom to be the best you can be. What do you want to believe? And I'll give you an example. When I quit smoking, I heard all the time that people had to gain weight. And I said, I'm just not going to believe that. And I said, when I quit smoking, it'll be on a, just wake up one day, I'll be ready, and I'm not going to gain weight. And that's exactly what happened. And it wasn't always easy. Now it's a piece of cake, but back in the day, it wasn't. But I was very determined. But by doing that, before I even was a hypnotherapist, I was changing my consciousness. I was changing my beliefs. And that's what I try to help you to recognize what your negative beliefs are and to change them. And the next level that you have is your emotions. And that's what most people don't ever want to talk about, is their emotions. And their emotions do affect us. And how to recognize when you have anger or fear or guilt or beliefs that aren't elevating you. To give you an example, I have used this in a lot of talks, that a lot of us have anger, unless you have a lobotomy, by the way. We all have all the emotions. They're not bad. It's just what you do with them. And so I try to help you realize, okay, no matter what I'm feeling, it's okay. What am I going to do with it to create the most positive effect in my life? So I had the CFO come to me one time for marketing, because he was doing nothing during the day to market his business and he was going under. He basically, if he didn't get on the stick and market his business, he was not going to make it. So I was his last resort. Most of the time I'm the last resort for people, which is a hoot. Anyway, in my sessions, I always talk to people and ask them questions. I'm pretty intuitive, and most of the time I don't even know why I'm asking certain questions. But I said, you sound like you're self-sabotaging yourself. Sounds like you're angry. He goes, I'm not angry. And I said, well, the results are that you are. So what happened to you recently? He goes, well, I'm on my own because I was working for somebody. And I said, well, why'd you leave that place? And he said, well, I got fired. Why'd you get fired? Well, I was ethical. He was a CFO. They wanted him to fix the books, and he wouldn't do it. And then they fired him. And I said, well, you're presenting everything in your life that you are sabotaging yourself, so that tells me that you are angry in some way, shape, or form. And if it's unconscious, many times you don't feel that anger. So we worked with the anger on one session, and I gave him a dream suggestion to vent out some of the anger. And he came back the next week, and he did 50% more work on his business from that one session. We didn't even talk about marketing. We didn't even talk about motivation. We worked with the anger first. So that's what I try to help you. It's like your own detective. You're looking at yourself and going, okay, am I thinking things that are positive? And if you're not, that's fine. You want to ferret out those negative thinking. Am I feeling something that could be impinging on me? And I help you recognize what that is. And then the third thing I try to help you with is to know that all of this is a spiritual experience. All of this is a spiritual journey. And I give you tools to connect, help you connect with yourself spiritually, regardless of what path you're on. One of the things I talk about is a mantra, and it's a high vibratory word, and I use the word hue. It's an ancient name for God. And once a month in Pinehurst, I lead a hue. I used to lead a hue here. I probably will again, and it's giving you a tool to help you raise your vibrations and connect with the Holy Spirit, to open your heart. Now, to tell you how much it can affect your life. Now, I was a mess and that made in my life, and that's what made me a very, very good therapist. I not only left home when I was young, I also was a bulimic for 14 years and did drug and alcohol and everything else and had bad relationships. And I think I had panic attacks too, but heck, and I smoked. I mean, okay, I don't do any of that anymore. Anyway, I wanted to learn how to meditate. And meditation for most people is like leaving your mind a blank. And that would just put me to sleep. And then somebody told me about sound, connecting with spirit through sound. Because you talk about the light, you don't always talk about the sound. And the Holy Spirit, or Spirit, teaches us and connects us with sound and light. So I just learned about repeating a mantra. This is when I was at the height of my bulimic. And I was probably throwing up 6 to 10 times a day for 14 years. And I had no hope of not being a bulimic. And after working with a mantra, and I wasn't doing it like with the mind going, oh, please don't let me be a bulimic anymore. I just wanted to be happy. I just, recited that until I felt a little change in my heart. Because one of the concepts that I teach too is the law of cause and effect. What you do in this moment, this now, there is only now, creates your future. So I really took that to heart. So in this now, I got to the place where I felt better. So I know that in my future, I'd feel a little bit better. I was that, depressed. After about 6 weeks, the bulimia just went away. I didn't focus on it. I never have been a bulimic since. I don't have to worry about food. I don't focus on food. I mean, it's not an issue. It just went away because my vibrations changed. My consciousness changed. So I have tons of stories like this. Now, part of my book is talking about reincarnation. You don't have to believe that. I do. I wasn't raised that way because I was raised Catholic. But again, I told you I was always a seeker, and I was always, just kind of plugged in that way. And I just knew as a child that this was not the only journey. And in fact, at one time I had an argument with my mother before I ran away from home, and, kind of a snotty little teenager. And we got in a fight, and I said, why did you have so many kids? The youngest, 8. She goes, well, if I didn't have you, you wouldn't be here. And I said, yeah, I would. I'd be just in a different family. That made her go, bing, 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 bing. I wasn't trying to be that snotty. I was just trying to tell her the truth. But there's many stories in here about people who have had experiences with reincarnation. And the premise for these stories is of people that I know that they could not get their awareness about reincarnation from a book or TV or a movie. It had to be through personal experience before they even heard of it. So that's where these stories come from. And it's pretty compelling when you start reading these stories about reincarnation, and it's just about soul coming back to learn how to love more if you need to. That's all there is to it. And again, karma is just, can be good, bad, or neutral. It's the actions that you've taken. So I'm just going to wrap it up. There is a lot in this little book, many personal stories, many more of personal stories of myself and how Spirit has helped me to help you awaken up to, I'm sure you've had your own stories about these, but just to live more of that way. And by living more of that way, you have more joy. You have more wisdom, and you can affect even others better. So with that, and it also comes in audio for the sound, but it's on Amazon. I don't have the audio with me because it's impossible. Anyway, thank you.
Well, this is the fastest this has ever gone, because usually it's a half an hour for each person. So what I would like to ask right now is, does anybody have any questions for either Shelby or Marian?
Shelby, we have found that it is better to publish through Amazon. You have more control, you get it out faster, you make more money. Yeah, it's just, and it's the way they make it now, it is so easy. Even with the audio, it is just super duper easy. Yeah.
Over that, maybe a little bit more like how to write a book, as far as
Honestly, just sit down and start writing. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Two blind leading the blind here. Here, go ahead.
Sure, just sit, I mentioned earlier, sit down and start writing. And don't make a plan that says, oh, I have to write a book. Just, what was a story that you'd like to tell? Tell the story to the computer. And at the end of it, you might have what you want to share with other people. And you can share it in a lot of ways. First of all, if you don't want to write a book, you can share it online through blogs or Facebook, however, whatever system you participate in, which I did before this. But yes, just put it up there. Say, here it is. Or you can get help. Just actually go on Google and ask the question you're asking me. All right. Go on there and say, how do I publish a book, or how do I get a blog started or get something online so other folks can share it and enjoy it. But if you actually go into Kindle, which is the publishing portion of Amazon, it's called Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP. So you upload the information. If you want to get a book's cover done for you, the graphics, you can go online. There's a place called Fiverr, which you can hire somebody, $50. You give them some pictures, and they'll put it into a nice cover like this, or back of the book, like Marian's got these pretty pictures on her back here.
My sister and I did.
Yes. Well, the point is, if you can't do that, you pay somebody $50 to do it. Formatting the book so that it can go on to Kindle, that might cost you $50. Total cost of my first book cost more than anything because I didn't know what I was doing. Total cost of my last book, $250. Total cost to publish it on Amazon, $0. It's free. It's,
We're making a profit on you,
yeah, in other words, right.
but if you're making more money than you would be a publisher.
Oh, yeah. Publishers,
You gotta wait for a year.
Yeah. and you have to sometimes, if it's what do they call it? A vanity publisher, where you just want books that you can share with people, you have to buy like 1,000 of them in order for them to be willing to publish it. Back.
He is absolutely right about how to start a book. I mean, just sit down and write. You have two different people. He wanted to write. I didn't want to write. We both wrote a book. And it's really just sitting down very consistently. And I always say to my clients, what is the least amount of time would you put in that you'd be consistent with something? And when I had to rewrite my second book, I wanted to do some editing. I said, what would be the least amount of time I'd be consistent? And what time of the day is the best for me? And for me, it's the morning. So I'd say 5 o'clock in the morning for half an hour. And I did that. And I thought, well, it'd take a year. It took 3 months. So it's the consistency and just sitting down and see what comes out. It's the same thing with art or anything else. So there you go.
The editing process, do you let somebody else look at that?
I always had a professional editor. When I started, I was, again, guided by Spirit to have a very professional editor, and she was with me for all 3 books. In fact, for the 3rd book, so I don't think I'll be writing another one after you hear this, I called her and I said, are you still editing? Because I trusted her totally. And she said, yes, but I'm not well. I said, okay, but you can still do it. She said, yeah. We both, Shelby and I, published and got it out in March, and my editor died 2 months later. Yeah. But, yeah, and Shelby, but you had different people. You didn't have a professional.
Again, you can get professionals online through multiple places. Again, go on Google and ask, how can I get someone to help me write a book? How can I go on? All right, I want proof that people were on the other end of this thing. Okay.
Yeah, you get a microphone and you get a mic.
Okay.
Okay. You know, just ask. Again, I used a online place called Fiverr, Fiverr, I think. And what I will do is I'll be glad to give you my email address, and you send me a note, and I can send you all the links that you can just directly do it.
My son, who is a beautiful writer.
Okay, well, I'll give you my email address, and you can send it to him, and he can ask me all the questions he likes.
Yeah, I
How's
think you
that
have
sound?
more technical answers than I do.
Yes,
so.
sir. Uh,
Well, that depends on the book and the person.
Absolutely. My first book took a year just to get all out there, and then another year to get it published. The most recent book took about 18 months from start to finish, but I was really focusing on trying to do different things in that book. But you want to take your time. And what I did what I learned to do as I went along is I got help with each chapter. I set up a system of friends who, one was a PhD in English and the other was a medical doctor, retired, and I would give them a chapter and they would give me feedback or edit it on that way. And that way, once I got to the professional editor, it didn't cost me as much money.
But I would definitely, if you have people helping you, then have it done by a professional editor, because that's their job. Each book was different. The first book took about 2 years, because it was all about rewriting for me. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was getting everything like inwardly, and I was writing it down, and it was just, you just don't know what you're doing, but the point is you're doing it. And then by the end of it, I did know what I was doing somewhat. And then the second book, probably a year. And then this was about a year. So it just depends.
Okay.
They were all self-published, mine, yes. Well, actually, no, the first one, well, yeah, it kind of was, but it was way before Amazon had any books, and you had to go through publishing companies, not the book companies, but if you wanted to run off a line of your own, you had to have a book broker talk to these people in their language. Somehow or another, I was able to find them and get them, and then you had to order a certain amount of books back then. So. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Well, we're independent. There you go.
What about as far as like your marketing goes? Do you keep it on Amazon and go that way? Do little things like what we're doing today, or do you have your own like going out to bookstores?
If you want to be a happy amateur author, set low goals. But to whatever level you want. Marian does a lot more than I do. But
No, I agree with you. It's just, I think both of our journeys were driven by a passion and not going out there to make the best, bestseller. And if I reach one person and help change their life, my life has been worth it. And that's my philosophy. And I have a YouTube station or channel, and I do different talks, but am I ever going to be like a Patterson? No. No. But I'm extremely happy with what I do, and I've had people come up to me and say that the book has helped their life tremendously.
Just to build on that, whoever you're talking to who wants to write, even if you don't ever sell a book, it's just a very rewarding thing to write a book.
There's so
It
many
really
people out
is.
there that say, I want to write a book, and then they never do. And I agree with you.
When you finish, you just feel good.
There you go.
All right,
I did that? I can't believe that.
dismissed.
Well, they're all memoirs, so for me,
Absolutely.
yeah. Any other questions? Well, we'll be in the back.
Thank you.
you, Lynn. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you, guys. I know we were having another speaker at 3 o'clock, and it's not 3 o'clock yet, so I'd like to give him a couple more minutes just in case he does show up. But I just want to say thank you very much to Caldwell Banker and Kristen Muller and her husband Tim, the Muller team. They have lovely refreshments there. They've got apple cider that's delicious. They've got cookies that are from Trader Joe's, so they're not just regular Chip Ahoys. They're actually delicious. There's a pumpkin one that's really amazing. And they have apples. I mean, how nice, and they're fresh. It's fall. So anyway, if you want to go back and speak with Marian and speak with Shelby at their table, see what they have brought today, that would be lovely. And thank you so much for coming. Well, we need this because it's live stream. See the little camera in the ceiling?
Well, I'm on a witness protection.
Here is my old friend and shop owner of the Old Sport Gallery. He has a fabulous background. His name is Tom Stewart, and he's well known worldwide. That's what I'm just going to say right now. Here's Tommy. Tommy boy.
Well, I'm none of those things. I'm just 2 shots away from being a caddy. But Bill Edsel, I thought you weren't allowed here. Well, Lynn asked me to come and talk, and I'm happy to do it. And it's the first time I've been in here. I might start coming here. I'm older than most of you in here, so I qualify. I've done a couple of books, and I've published 8 for other people. But she said this is a kind of a book club, and lo and behold, I did 2 books. One Arlen Palmer did the introduction for, called A Tribute to Golf, which was the best essays from all the books that I had collected over the years, and was very successful. Then I did another one called The Nature of Golf, which was about the environmental benefit of golf courses, that for a lot of people it's the only place that they see the outdoors, and it can be great green spaces for places. I do have another book coming out called What Time is the Noon Shotgun, which is a play on, Lynn, you know what this is. Anyway, and what I want to do is talk about an experience that I had early in my career that basically kind of changed my life. I think it's going to be the first chapter in my book. In 1989, I was playing tournaments wherever I could get in, and I was invited to play in a tournament in Calcutta, India, and it was the oldest club outside the United Kingdom, and it was 150th anniversary, their sesquicentenary, and I got there, and of course I'm a kid from a small town in northern Michigan and hadn't been exposed to that kind of a worldly scene, and so I got there and dug in, played the golf tournament, and I had just read a book while I was flying over called Something Beautiful for God by Malcolm Muggeridge about Mother Teresa. Well, having grown up in northern Michigan in a Catholic school and an altar boy and all that goes with that experience, I said, while I'm here, after I played the tournament, and I was a hospice volunteer in Petoskey, Michigan, and really enjoyed that experience, I said, I wonder if Mother Teresa will let me come in and spend a few days in her home for the dying, which was called Normal Hride, in one of the worst slums in Calcutta. And she said, oh, my son, of course. And as she was about that high, but had the organizational skills of anybody from any big corporations, and quite a selfless lady. And but while I was there, the second I went to work at her place, and basically what we were doing were feeding these people that had been picked up off the streets. I mean, and I would say half of them that were brought into this very crude hospice were going to die within a few days. But so we clipped fingernails. I shaved men that were old, had beards. I cleaned bedpans. And up on top, this was not my favorite job, but they had little cots that they slept on. And you had to take their, I don't want to say sheets because they weren't that nice. They were rags. And you take them upstairs and wash them and bring them back down, and they had to hang out to dry. And but it was a unique experience. And you know, it was, if you walked into this place, you would not do it on your own volition. In the Catholic Church, we had something called grace, that you were given some help from somewhere. Let's say heaven, let's say God, let's say whatever. Doesn't matter. But so I walked in there. I would still be running if it was left up to me, because it was a terrifying situation to see all these people near death. And but there were volunteers from all over the world, young people that had come to help her in this. And so I said, well, I'm going to learn something from this. And sure enough, I did. But a lot of the interesting things, I actually told Bill Edsel this story, that one day I was on the front door of this place, and this huge limousine showed up, and it was a Saudi Arabian sheikh, whatever it is. And he came in and he said, "Is Mother Teresa here?" And I said, "Yes, she is." So I went to get her, and she came out, and he said, "Mother Teresa, I'm so-and-so, and I'm prepared to give you $1 million if we can take some pictures with you." "Oh, no, not yet. She said, "You could give $1 million and that would be gone in a few weeks. But I think if you come in and help us for a half hour, you will be changed for the rest of your life." Well, I don't have time for that. I can't do that. And sure enough, they left. And what she said, to turn down $1 million, you know, I should have said, "I'll take a picture with you," but it wouldn't have been the same. And but there she was, and she was exactly right. The money, that guy would have had a photo op, and he would have, losing or giving away $1 million would have meant nothing. But if he had come in and spent a half hour, he would have had pictures that were authentic, that were meaningful, and would have shown him as a person of empathy and compassion. That didn't happen. On another day, a guy came in, and I was on the door, and he said, "I'm a faith healer from West Virginia, and I can heal these people in here. I have healing properties." And I thought Mother Teresa will send him packing. No, she said, "Please come in, see what you can do. These people need healing, and we can only do so much." That guy walked in and looked around. I think he's still running wherever he went, because he was not going to take part in that. I mean, it was overwhelming, but it was really special. It changed my life. It was 1979, so I was 32, and you know, I had a pretty good handle on life, as you do at 32. I was unmarried and had been playing golf around the world. But after being part of that and watching these poor people that were near death, and to be able, for me, to be able to sit there and shave them with a straight razor, you know, I can barely do it for myself. How am I going to do it for a guy that's got more wrinkles than Bill has? But it was, but by doing it, it showed me that really it's, well, and the other thing is, you know, having been brought up in the 60s where the world was sort of coming apart, and, you know, I always stood for some causes, and I took responsibility for seeing the outcome of those things. And so, and without much luck most of the time. So I asked Mother Teresa one time, I said, "What, you're barely denting the surface." She said, I said, "You know, this is, you know, what you're doing is admirable, but do you ever see any change?" She said, "My son, God is not concerned with my results, only my efforts. And that took 1,000 pounds off of my shoulders because I thought I was responsible. If you're doing the work, you got to show something for it. Not really, because it's really out of our hands. But so that was worth a lot. And not long after, well, I was there for 2.5 weeks, and then I went up into Nepal. But before one of the nights that I was there, I stayed at the YMCA, and understand back in 1979, Calcutta was a very safe city. I mean, it's the poorest of the poor and a very poor town, and from a middle class background, you look at what's going on there, and you just realize that the world is more like that than what I went through, even though I came from a relatively poor situation. But while I was walking back, I'd gone to the Oberoi Grand Hotel to meet an ambassador from Bangladesh who also volunteered, and we went in there. I had a dinner, and on the way back, it was very dark. There's a coal haze that hangs over that city. You have to blow your nose about every 10 minutes, and you better have more than one handkerchief. But so on the way back, I'm walking just in my own head, and out of an alleyway, just never been so scared in my life. It's safe. You're not going to get mugged in Calcutta. There's something about the respect that people have for each other. In fact, some of those people that we picked up off the street, rather than steal an apple from their markets to stay alive, they I think would die instead of. I don't think I could do that, or many people could do it, but there was a respect for each other. And bear in mind, the Indians have several different castes that are depending on where you come from and what you do. But out of this alleyway came this, all I can call it is a mechanic's cart, those little things that guys lay on to get under a car. He had no legs. He was about 16 years old, beautiful looking young man with dark black hair, with the greatest smile you'd ever seen. But he had one long arm that he could propel himself, but he had no legs. He doesn't have, his right arm wasn't there. And he came up to me and said, "Bakshish Papa, from those who have to those who have not." And I have to tell you, it's the most afraid I was of anything. And what's unique about that, he couldn't hurt me. I was a marathon runner at the time, and in great shape, had worked out. And but sitting in front of me, all I could see was the international cry of justice from those who have to those who have not, which is not something you encounter in my hometown of Petoskey, Michigan. It didn't happen. You might find a few people that have had too much to drink laying on the floor, but not these people. But I looked at it, and I said, and I wrote in this paragraph, I said, his only weapon was my fear. I mean, he was in control of our encounter, because I was just stunned and didn't know what to do. Well, I had a few rupees in my pocket. I had a few dollars, and I reached in and over there you're told not to give to the beggars because they're run by syndicates, and that money may not go to them. But he was dressed, and so I reached in my pocket and gave him what I had, and sat there and looked at him, and he smiled the whole time, and the longer I stood there, which seemed like a half an hour, which was probably 3-4 minutes, I realized I was staring into the eyes of the injustice that has been not always just existed, but perpetrated around the world people that have that never give back. And so that really made an impact on me and humbled me in a way that I've never been humbled before. And after I'd given him some money, he said, "Bless you." And I walked on to my, and I never slept that night, just thinking of what I had encountered and how it changed my life. Like walking into Normal Hui Day had changed my life. But I put myself in a position, the reason I went to India, I was 32 and had broken up with a woman that I was going to marry. And so I was, a little loose. But lo and behold, it was one of those things that you find out who you are in circumstances like that. And then I went to, I left from there up into Nepal, where Kathmandu, Nepal was one of the most exotic places I'd ever been in 1979. I mean, I was a runner and I'd get up in the morning and, I'd run through these streets that, it's another thing I can't get out of my mind. There was a guy that had a big bull, and he had the only thing I can say was a sword. And as I'm running by, he brought that sword up and killed that bull. And there was a noise that emanated from that poor cow, bull, majestic animal, which would have been used for meat or whatever it was. And I can't get that out of my head because you're walking by something and you see something that's so foreign to your sensibilities that so that was one of the things. And there was a guy, Kathmandu, if you get outside, is a beautiful city. They have big stupas, Buddhist temples that are up in there, and they have prayer wheels where you go around and just roll these prayer wheels and prayer flags, which I did, and little kids, literally bare ass, playing in the dirt and in a little stream that was, I'm sure, full of things you wouldn't want to be around. And they had a little wheel, and I've seen it in movies and stuff where they have a little tire and they have a stick and they run along and make this wheel. I mean, it was their toy and their play. The greatest smiles on their faces, literally with nothing. And when I came back, I flew through the Miami airport. The first thing I encountered was some spoiled little kid with a boombox. His brother's was bigger than his, just crying and screaming and yelling. I said, whoa, I better decommission myself here before I go into anything else. And but the whole experience and in Nepal, I hired a bicycle rickshaw guy who was wonderful, and he spoke a little bit of English, and I knew no Nepali, but he would drive me around and take me to these places, and he put me onto a taxi that drove me out to a Buddhist temple in Bhaktapur, which is where a lot of the monks came over from a place, Tibet, and that's where a lot of them came. But I went in there and went in, and they were drumming and singing and chanting, but the drumming that they did in that temple, brought back. I grew up in northern Michigan, and one of my favorite things were Indian powwows, where the drumming and the chanting, it's kind of addictive. And these little kids with bells on their thing, and they're dancing, and it's always been one of my favorite things to go to. But you couldn't believe how much this drumming and chanting in Nepal was so akin to what these Indians, Native Americans, are doing in northern Michigan, which was stunning. And so I've never put a quarter in a slot machine in my life, but I was in Nepal, and I hadn't had a glass of cold water in a few days, so I went into this casino, which is terrible, and I threw in a couple rupees, and I mean, the noise of the world, I hit the jackpot. So here are all these things, and so I knew where the money was going to go because it wasn't mine. I hadn't earned it, and nothing had happened. And we, because Mother Teresa had a house in Kathmandu as well, but it was such a juxtaposition of what I had just been through and winning a jackpot. I've never won anything since, except maybe on the golf course. But anyway, it was a kind of experience that the reason I went over there was to see what I had to see. You know, you read Somerset Maugham and The Razor's Edge, and people that put themselves in a position where hopefully they can learn something. And I certainly learned something and hopefully brought it back. But it was, I came back, and it took a while. You know, golf is a pretty worldly business, and I've been lucky to be part of it. I love every minute of my work through the years, but I also knew that to those who have, something must be given back, and I hope I always carried that with me. Now, I mean, this book I've got enough for 2 books, but I've got to edit it down to 1. So let's see if anybody has any questions. I also been to a lot of other exotic places in the world. I was in Santiago, Chile, playing in the Chilean Open, and Seve Ballesteros, the great Spanish player, I was running, he was running. So we ran downtown. We were just outside of Santiago, beautiful city with a river running through it. We got into this piazza, and I don't speak much Spanish, and Seve's Spanish, so I let him do the talking. And there was a Jeep with a machine gun on it, and right next to it, there had to be 12 bodies lined up on the curb like cordwood that had been killed, and that was when Pinochet was dropping people out of helicopters. And unfortunately, we were one of the people that put him into power, but that's beside that. That was 1981. Yeah. Have you been there? Yeah. Before Pinochet? Yeah. No, that's Allende. Yeah. And that's that. This was, he had been there for a while when I got there, but I followed that because Coleman McCarthy, who wrote for the Washington Post, became a good friend of mine, and he told me about that assassination that took place in Washington D.C. and took me where it was, and but it was I mean, it was a scary time because, you know, it's such a beautiful country, and one man can take it over and do what he wants with it. I mean, that also taught me about some politics too, you know, and but during that time, so Seve's, you know, he's shouting at this guy in the Jeep with a machine gun, and I said, that might not be such a good thing to do. I ran the fastest quarter mile I ran in my life in the opposite direction, and he made it back. I made it back, but it was back. Actually, what was the year that Reagan beat Mondale? 80 was, but I think it was 80 the first time. Yeah, the first time that he beat it. So it would have been 80, and so we, you know, the golfers had been hosted by the American Embassy of, and that's, they asked everybody who came in, who'd you vote for, and stuff like that. And I'd had at University of North Carolina, the year that I was there, I had, oh gosh, I'm about to lose his name. He was an economics professor. Anyway, he ran for president that year with Winona LaDuke as his vice president, and this was when Carter beat Kennedy in the lead up to that election. And but anyway, it was Reagan was going to win anyway, so I wrote in. Shoot. Anyway, he was a professor at North Carolina, and he ran for president, and this woman was running with him. So it didn't matter. But when I gave that name, I said, well, he's not running. I said, yeah, he was my professor at the University of North Carolina. And so, politics is getting stranger by the minute. And, I shouldn't say this because I might offend somebody, but Donald Trump was a member at my golf club that I ran for Arnold Palmer in South Florida. I was there for 10 years. And Donald Trump was a Democrat back then, so this is not about politics. But I can honestly say he was the most toxic human being that I had ever met in my life. And this is not a political statement. It's just, as a judge of human beings, you can't be a golf professional and not see every bit of humanity you can see. And it turns out Arnie kicked him out because he was a disruptor of the membership and stuff. And it turns out that Tom Ridge, who was a Republican governor of Pennsylvania, was one of Arnie's best friends. He actually did ads for Biden during the end of that campaign. But if you can't get Arnold Palmer to like you, you got an issue. But that's just a side. But again, I said it's not politics because back then he was a Democrat. He was giving money to Clintons and everybody. So, but any questions? Anyone you want to go back to Calcutta with me? No, it was yes, sir. You know what? I've always I played on the Asian tour, and one of my last stops was Bombay, or now Mumbai, and it was very similar there. Several years later, and one of the things that I didn't mention, when the Pope had given Mother Teresa an ambulance on the wrong side of the road, the driver. And one day she said, can you drive? I said, I'm North American. Every North American drives. She said, oh, good, you can be my driver. That was a pretty harrowing experience because in Calcutta, India, and she said this, she said, please don't hit any of these animals. You'll be in big trouble. And the people, probably not so much, but it's like driving in a jar full of bees. You're moving, but you never go anywhere. And that's kind of, the way you felt. And I survived that. And but again, it's, you can do anything if you have the right mind and the right attitude. I tell my son, when he was coming up and getting ready to go to college, I said, Brian, I said, I don't want to hear you griping about this or that. I said, when I was a kid, my dad had a word, deal with it or cope with it. And I said, the kind of day you're going to have starts with you. You're in charge of your attitude. And if you have an attitude that said the world is the worst it's ever been, that's the kind of world you'll see. But if you start with an attitude that the world is a wonderful place, the universe wants us to succeed, and if you have the right attitude, you're going to have a great day. But if you start with a crappy attitude, and another way that I learned this, there was a guy in the 60s called Werner Erhard who did something called EST. And I signed up, paid $100 in San Francisco to go to this lecture. And he was the most obnoxious guy. I would have left. He's puffing on a cigar, and I'm in the middle of a row. I can't get out, but I would have left. But before it ended, he said, one thing I want you to take out of here. We all go through life judging stuff. Is that a good cloud or a bad cloud? Well, it's a cloud. If you can quit coloring everything with your own judgments, that you're gonna have a much easier life. That guy, don't you're not going to like that guy. I've actually had people who, when I first come to town, they say, you're not going to like that guy. I said, time out. I'll choose my own friends. And, and often it was at odds with what that person was telling me. But attitude is everything. If somebody walks into my shop and starts to bitch and moan, I said, you've come to the wrong place, pal. Because, my cup is half full, and you're not going to change that. So, take your angst and the rest of your stuff, bias to, somewhere else. And not everybody likes that. It's not a good sales tool, actually. But any other questions? Lynn, I appreciate that. This is an honor.
Sorry we had as big of a crowd as we would love,
No,
but, oops, sorry.
Never about the size of the crowd. It's about the character of the people.
The people that are here.
Except for Lynn.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, I'm really glad you guys did come today, and I can't believe the weather is just so bizarre. It goes from being very sunny, and then it was, as you were talking, all of a sudden it got like weird color outside, so it's kind of a different day. I love it because I come from LA where every day is exactly the same. So to me, I enjoy it. It is extremely boring. That's why we love living here. So anyway, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to Shelby and Marian and Tom. Thank you to Kristen and Tim. And thank you all for coming and staying. And I appreciate you guys and hope you have a great rest of the day.